take a deep breath and look around you. We live in a world of logic, a world where we've been told that human history is a straight, predictable line. We started as primitive hunters, mastered fire, built some stone monuments, and eventually, we landed on the moon. It's a comfortable story. It's the story in every textbook. But there is a problem. Deep in the forbidden archives of our own planet, there are objects that should not exist. Artifacts that shatter every timeline we've ever constructed. I'm not talking about myths or legends. I'm talking about physical, tangible evidence that has been pulled from the deepest mines, the highest mountains, and the darkest ocean floors. We found metallic spheres embedded in 2.8 billion-year-old rock, long before life even crawled out of the sea. We've discovered colossal stone walls in Siberia, built with precision that our modern cranes couldn't dream of replicating. We've uncovered maps of Antarctica from centuries ago that show the continent as it looked before it was ever covered in ice. And we found DNA, hidden in elongated skulls in Peru, that simply does not belong to the human family tree. The establishment calls them out-of-place artifacts. They are labeled as anomalies, tucked away in museum basements and quietly ignored, because if we admit these objects are real, we have to admit that we are not the first. We have to admit that a massive, sophisticated, and perhaps non-human chapter of our history has been completely erased. Today, we are bringing these anomalies into the light. From the gear-filled fossils of Russia to the submerged highways of the Bahamas, we are counting down 7 suppressed discoveries that prove history is a lie. Are you ready to face the truth? Our journey begins in the deep mines of South Africa, near a small town called Ottosdal. For decades, miners working in the Wonderstone silver mines have been pulling something extraordinary out of the ground. They are known as the Klerksdorp Spheres. At first glance, they might look like simple stones, or perhaps ancient cannonballs. But when you hold one in your hand, you realize that nature doesn't work this way. These objects are perfectly balanced spheres, ranging from 1 to 10 centimeters in diameter. Some are a dark metallic blue, others are reddish-brown. But their most striking feature is the series of 3 perfectly parallel grooves etched around their equator, as if they were turned on a precision lathe. Now here's where the story gets uncomfortable for mainstream science. The rock they are embedded in is pyrophyllite, a mineral that formed approximately 2.8 billion years ago. Let that number sink in for a moment. 2.8 billion years. According to our current understanding of biology, the only life on Earth at that time was simple, single-celled organisms, cyanobacteria. There was no one to craft a tool, no one to smelt metal, and certainly no one to design a balanced sphere. Yet, here they are. When these spheres were first examined, some researchers claimed they were so perfectly balanced that they exceeded the measuring limits of the laboratory's technology. One story, often told by the curator of the Klerksdorp Museum, Rolf Marx, suggests that a sphere kept in a vibration-free glass case would slowly rotate on its own axis, as if driven by an internal power source we cannot see. Mainstream geologists, of course, have an answer. They call them limonite concretions. They argue that these spheres formed naturally through a process of sedimentary precipitation. They say the grooves are the result of pressure from the surrounding rock over eons. But this explanation feels hollow to many. Why are they so perfectly spherical? Why are the grooves so precisely parallel? And why, when cut open, do some of these spheres reveal a strange fibrous interior that turns to dust when exposed to the air? If these spheres are natural, they are a freak of geology that we've never seen anywhere else in the universe. But if they are artificial, then we are looking at the oldest technology ever discovered. We are looking at a fingerprint left behind by an intelligence that existed long before the continents had even finished forming. Were they sensors? Were they part of a massive ancient planetary machine? Or are they simply the discarded toys of a civilization that saw the birth of our world? Whatever they are, the Klerksdorp Spheres remain a silent, metallic defiance to everything we think we know about the deep past. For our 6th discovery, We travel to the remote wilderness of southern Siberia, specifically to a place called Mount Shoria. For a long time, this region was only known for its rugged beauty and harsh winters. But in 2014, a team of researchers led by Georgy Sidorov stumbled upon a site that has since sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. They found a wall, but not just any wall. Imagine, if you will, granite blocks of such staggering size that they make the stones of Stonehenge look like pebbles. We are talking about megaliths that are estimated to weigh upwards of 3,000 tons. To put that into perspective, the largest stone ever moved by modern man, the Thunderstone in St. Petersburg, weighs about 1,500 tons. The blocks at Mount Shoria are double that. As you look at the footage, pay attention to the precision. These are not jagged, natural rock formations. These stones feature flat faces, sharp 90-degree angles, and perfectly straight seams. They are stacked one on top of the other, reaching a height of 40 meters. In some areas, the joints between these multi-ton blocks are so tight that you cannot even slide a razor blade between them. Mainstream geologists often dismiss Mount Shoria as a result of magmatic differentiation, basically saying that nature just happened to crack these rocks into perfect cubes. But there is a massive problem with that theory. Nature rarely produces straight lines, and it almost never stacks massive blocks in such a deliberate architectural fashion. Furthermore, many of the stones show signs of strange, localized magnetic interference. Compasses go haywire when brought near the seams, and electronic equipment has been known to malfunction. This suggests that these stones aren't just sitting there. They might have been part of an ancient technological system. Some researchers suggest the site was a massive energy harvester, while others believe it's a remnant of a pre-cataclysmic civilization, a culture that existed before the last great flood, possessing the technology to soften or levitate stone as if it were clay. But perhaps the most chilling part is the location. Mount Shoria is high up in the mountains. Even with our most advanced hydraulic cranes and heavy-lift helicopters, moving a 3,000-ton block to this altitude today would be an engineering nightmare, if not an outright impossibility. So, who built it? How did they move stones that outweigh our modern capabilities? And why was this massive fortress, or temple, built in the middle of the Siberian wilderness? Mount Shoria stands as a silent, monolithic reminder that our ancestors weren't just primitive, they were giants of engineering, whose secrets we have long since forgotten. For our fifth discovery, we are heading to the coldest, most desolate place on Earth, Antarctica. But we aren't looking at the ice, we are looking at what lies beneath it. In 1737, a French geographer named Philippe Buache published a map that should have been impossible. You see, officially, Antarctica wasn't even discovered until 1820. Yet here was a map nearly a century earlier depicting the frozen continent with staggering detail. But it's not the timing that's the mystery, it's the geography. Buache's map does not show Antarctica as the single, massive, ice-covered landmass we see today. Instead, it depicts the continent as two large, distinct islands separated by a vast inland sea. For over 200 years, historians laughed this off as a mistake, a cartographer's fantasy. They believed Buache had simply guessed and failed. But then, 1958 arrived. During the International Geophysical Year, scientists conducted the first-ever comprehensive seismic surveys of Antarctica. They used sonar and deep-crust imaging to look through miles of solid ice, and what they found chilled them to the bone. Beneath the ice sheet, Antarctica is exactly what Philippe Buache drew in 1737, a subglacial archipelago divided by a deep waterway. Now, consider the implications. According to our climate records, the last time Antarctica was free of ice was millions of years ago, long before humans supposedly existed. Yet, the Buache map shows the continent without its icy shroud, accurately depicting mountains and valleys that are currently buried under 4 kilometers of frozen water. How is this possible? Philippe Buache claimed he didn't discover this information himself. He compiled his work from ancient source maps belonging to the Ottoman Empire and ancient Greek mariners. This suggests a terrifying truth. that thousands of years ago, a global civilization possessed the technology to survey the entire planet, including the South Pole, long before the ice ever claimed it. Were these the maps of Atlantis? Or perhaps the records of a seafaring culture that flourished during a forgotten warm period of our Earth's history? If someone was mapping the subglacial topography of Antarctica while the rest of humanity was supposedly living in caves, then our entire timeline of human development is nothing more than a house of cards. The Buache Map isn't just a piece of paper. It's a photograph of a world that mainstream history says we were never meant to see. For our fourth discovery, we climb the treacherous, wind-swept peaks of the Himalayas into the heart of Nepal and Tibet. Here, stories of gods from the stars are woven into the very fabric of local culture. But in the late 1940s, a Polish professor named Robin Evans reportedly found a physical object that transformed these myths into a chilling reality. It is known as the Lolladoff Plate. At first glance, it looks like a simple stone disc, about 9 inches in diameter. But as you look closer, the carvings tell a story that feels more like modern science fiction than ancient history. The plate features a perfect spiral design, a spiral that many astronomers say is a precise representation of a Milky Way-like galaxy. But it's what sits at the end of that spiral that defies explanation. Carved clearly into the stone is a figure that we today would instantly recognize: a gray alien. It has the classic bulbous head, large almond-shaped eyes, and a small, thin body. Standing right next to this entity is a disc-shaped craft, hovering above the ground with what appears to be beams of light or energy emitting from its base. The plate is estimated to be at least 12,000 years old. Think about that. 12 millennia ago, when our ancestors were supposedly just beginning to transition from hunting to basic agriculture, someone was carving images of galactic spirals and extraterrestrial beings into solid stone. Critics often dismiss the Lolladoff Plate as a hoax or a misplaced ritual object. But they struggle to explain the iconography. How did a primitive culture understand the spiral structure of our galaxy, a fact that modern humanity only confirmed with powerful telescopes in the 20th century? And why is the figure on the plate an exact match for the entities reported in thousands of modern close encounters? The Lolladoff Plate is often linked to the legendary Dropa stones, hundreds of similar discs found in the caves of Bayan Karaula, which allegedly tell the story of a spacecraft that crashed in the mountains 12,000 years ago. Whether the plate is a survivor of that crash or a tribute built by those who witnessed it, the message is clear. We have never been alone. Our ancestors didn't just look at the stars. They spoke with those who came from them, and they left this stone record behind, waiting for a generation that was finally advanced enough to understand it. For our third discovery, we travel to the remote and volcanic peninsula of Kamchatka in the Russian Far East. This is a land of fire and ice, but in 2012, it became the center of a scientific firestorm. A group of archaeologists from the University of St. Petersburg were exploring a remote wilderness area when they chipped away at a piece of volcanic rock and found something that sent chills down their spines. Embedded deep within the solid stone were hundreds of interlocking metal gears. This wasn't just a single cog or a stray bolt. It was a complex mechanical assembly, a machine frozen in time. Now, here's the part that defies all logic. The rock containing these gears was dated to the Paleogene period. That means these mechanical parts are approximately 400 million years old. To put that in perspective, 400 million years ago, the first forests were just starting to grow. Dinosaurs wouldn't even exist for another 150 million years. According to every textbook on Earth, the only life forms present were fish and primitive plants. So, how does a machine, built with precision-engineered gears and high-purity metal, end up inside a 400 million-year-old rock? Archaeologist Yuri Golubev, who examined the find, stated that the gears appeared to be artificially manufactured. They weren't natural crystal formations. They had the distinct shape and symmetry of a clockwork mechanism, or perhaps a sophisticated navigational computer. The metal used was a specific alloy, designed to resist the immense pressure of the Earth over eons. Mainstream science has tried to bury this discovery, claiming it must be a misinterpretation of fossilized sea creatures called crinoids. But anyone who has looked at the high-resolution scans can see the difference. Crinoids have organic, soft edges. These are sharp, geometric, and mechanically interlocking teeth. The Kamchatka gear fossil presents us with a terrifying choice. Either our understanding of geological time is completely wrong, or an advanced technological civilization was operating on this planet hundreds of millions of years before the first human ever stood upright. Were they visitors from another world, or is the history of life on Earth far more complex than a simple climb from the primordial soup? This fossil isn't just a curiosity. It's a smoking gun that proves the industrial age might not be a modern invention, but a rediscovery of a technology that existed when the world was still young. For our second discovery, we dive beneath the crystal-clear waters of the Bahamas, specifically near North Bimini Island. On the seabed, 20 feet down, lies a massive, ancient structure that has haunted the dreams of archaeologists and treasure hunters for over 50 years. It is known as the Bimini Road. Discovered in 1968 by Joseph Manson Valentine, this isn't just a pile of rocks. It is a half-mile-long path of massive, rectangular limestone blocks, some as large as 13 feet across. They are laid out with such deliberate precision that they look like a grand highway leading to a city that no longer exists. Now, mainstream geologists are quick to dismiss this as tessellated pavement, a natural phenomenon where beach rock fractures into neat squares. But there is a glaring problem with the natural explanation. When divers began to excavate beneath the blocks, they found something that nature simply doesn't do. They discovered leveling stones, smaller rocks placed strategically underneath the massive slabs to keep the road flat against the undulating ocean floor. This is an engineering technique used in the construction of ancient Roman roads and modern highways alike. But the real mystery of Bimini Road isn't just in the stones, it's in a prophecy. 30 years before the road was discovered, the famous sleeping prophet Edgar Cayce predicted that the ruins of the lost continent of Atlantis would be found in the waters off Bimini in either 1968 or 1969. To the shock of the world, that is exactly when and where these stones appeared. Carbon dating of shells embedded in the rocks suggests they were submerged around 12,000 years ago, the exact same time that global sea levels rose dramatically at the end of the last ice age. This coincides perfectly with Plato's account of Atlantis being swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. Was Bimini Road a harbor wall, a breakwater for a massive port, or a sacred walkway to a temple of a forgotten civilization? The establishment wants us to believe these are just random cracks in the seabed. But as you look at these perfectly fitted blocks stretching out into the blue abyss, you have to ask, are we looking at a geological fluke, or are we staring at the last remaining evidence of a global empire that was wiped off the face of the earth before history even began? We have reached our number one discovery, and it is the most unsettling of them all. For decades, we believed that humans were the only intelligent, upright species to ever rule this planet. But in 1928, in the desert peninsula of Paracas, Peru, archaeologist Julio Tello discovered a massive, complex graveyard. What he pulled from the sand wasn't just ancient remains, they were the skulls of a race that shouldn't exist. Now, we've all seen photos of head binding from ancient cultures, where wooden boards are used to flatten a child's head. But the Paracas skulls are different. Physically, biologically, and genetically, they defy that explanation. First, let's look at the anatomy. A human skull has two parietal plates, the bones that form the top and sides of the head, connected by a seam called the sagittal suture. These skulls, they have only one massive parietal plate. There is no seam. Furthermore, these skulls have 25% more volume and are 60% heavier than any human skull. You can bind a head to change its shape, but you cannot increase the volume of the bone or the size of the brain. It is physically impossible. But the real bombshell dropped in 2014, when geneticists conducted the first DNA tests on hair, skin, and teeth samples from these remains. The results were so shocking that the researchers hesitated to release them. The mitochondrial DNA showed unknown mutations not found in any human, Neanderthal, or Denisovan ever recorded. The lab reports suggested that we were looking at a new, human-like creature that was so genetically distant from us that they likely couldn't even interbreed with modern humans. They had larger eye sockets, a completely different jaw structure, and their foramen magnum, the hole where the spine enters the skull, was positioned further back than ours, suggesting a different way of walking. Who were they? Were they the Nephilim mentioned in ancient texts, or a separate branch of humanity that evolved in isolation, or perhaps off-world? Mainstream history wants to bury these skulls in museum basements because they prove that the human family tree is much more crowded than we were told. They were the elite, the long-skulled rulers of ancient Peru who possessed knowledge and DNA that we are only now beginning to decode. The Paracas skulls aren't just a mystery, they are a mirror. They force us to ask, if we weren't the only ones here, who else shared our world? And more importantly, where did they go? We have journeyed from the metallic spheres of a 2-billion-year-old Earth to the genetic mysteries of the Peruvian desert. We've looked at maps that see through ice and gears that predated the dinosaurs. These 7 discoveries are not just random anomalies or mistakes of history. They are the smoking guns. They are the cracks in the carefully constructed wall of mainstream archaeology. When we look at these artifacts together, a new picture of our species begins to emerge. We are not the first actors on this stage, and we are likely not the most advanced. We are a species with amnesia, living among the ruins of giants, using their stones to build our huts and their ancient maps to find our way. The suppression of these finds isn't just about protecting old textbooks. It's about controlling the narrative of who we are and what we are capable of. If a civilization could map Antarctica 6,000 years ago or build 3,000-ton walls in Siberia, then what happened to them? And more importantly, what will happen to us? History isn't a straight line of progress. It is a cycle of rising and falling, of remembering and forgetting. The truth is hidden in plain sight, waiting for those brave enough to look beyond the consensus. But the investigation doesn't end here. The desert sands are still shifting, and the ice is still melting, revealing secrets that have been buried for eons. Which of these 7 discoveries shook your world the most? Do you believe we are the pinnacle of evolution, or just the latest chapter in a much longer, stranger story? Let us know your theories in the comments below. If you want to keep digging into the forbidden truths of our past, hit that subscribe button and join our community of truth seekers. Because the past isn't dead, it's just waiting to be rediscovered. Thank you for watching and stay curious.